Good Monday Matters. I hope you had a wonderful Sabbath and are looking forward to a new week and all that God has in store for you. My name is Mike Courtney and this is Monday Matters. Every Monday I take a few minutes to talk about something to make your life happier, healthier, and perhaps a little bit holier. Last week I talked about just the goodness of God and some of the things that God had done in our lives last week and some of the events. And one of the things that happened is us being involved in a marriage conference in Georgia, and Doris and I sharing our story. And then the pastor came up to us and said, "Man, that was so powerful. Would you stay over the next day and share your story in church?" And just since then, I've had 2 or 3 people who have just coincidentally just come up and said, I heard your story for the first time, and so I want to talk about the power of telling your story. We have a tendency to either keep our story secret or only put our best foot forward to try to just show the very best side. But there is great power in telling the whole story, in being open and honest and transparent, particularly with those people that will be connected to your story in some way. For example, your children and your children's children. I think it's important to let them know your story. And so I want to do 2 things. This is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to try something a little bit different. I want to talk to you about the power of doing that, why you do that, and then I want to give you a way to do that. And this is going to be a stretch for me. You'll see when we get to that point. And it may. I always tell people I have thousands of ideas. Most of them are not good, and this may be one of the not good ones. But first, the reason for telling your story. 4 Bible verses came to my mind as I started thinking about this, and I just want to share those 4 Bible verses with you. And here's a good reason to tell your story, to be willing to do that. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul is talking about, he's been accused of being a little boastful perhaps and bragging on himself. And then at the same time, his qualifications for being a leader in the church are questioned. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 3 and 4, he says this: "You yourselves are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everybody. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts." The first reason to tell your story is there's great affirmation. There's affirmation of what God has done. There's affirmation of how other people have been positive in your life. And there's affirmation of the change in you. Listen, my children on some level are going to face some struggles in life. I wish I could have lived a perfect life in front of them. Blew that a long time ago. But what I did do is tell them my story that says God can get you through this. You can I affirm that there's something better in you than this. And so telling your story, there's great affirmation in that of the fact that God has been at work and what He can do and how other people have been involved in helping you. So tell your story because there's great affirmation in it. The second thing, tell your story because there is great victory in it. Here's a familiar verse, Revelation chapter 12, verse 11. In verse 10, the accuser of the brethren, Satan, the accuser of the brethren, accuses them day and night. And then verse 11, John writes, "And they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony." What Jesus had done in their lives, and then their willingness to tell that story to people over and over and over again. There is great victory in that. Listen, what the devil wants to do more than anything is condemn you for your story. The devil wants to say to you, if they really knew this, they would never love you. They would never let you speak. They would never value your opinion. If they really knew this, here's the way you beat him. You tell the story. You beat him to the punch. Here's my story. They already know. They already know the story. the devil will say to me every once, people really knew your story. I said, devil, I wrote a book about it. It's kind of out there. They know that. There's great victory in your story, in being willing to punch the devil in the nose and say, this is my story. God has been at work in my life. And being honest, being transparent about it. By the way, this is not part of it. I'm just throwing this in for free. But when you tell your story, tell the Jesus part. Sometimes we take 30 minutes and spend 28 of it on how bad and awful and wicked we were, and we end by saying, oh yeah, and Jesus saved me. No, the best part of your story is what Jesus did. Spend 10 minutes on the bad part and 20 minutes on how Jesus has saved you. So there's victory in it. Third thing, there's great comfort in your story. Back in 2 Corinthians, Paul says this in verse 1 and chapter 1, verse 4. He says, verse 3 says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. How do you do that? How do you comfort people? You tell them your story. You let them know what God has done. Listen, I know you feel like you're the only person in the world going through this. I know you feel like this is really hard, but I want you to know, here's my story. God has helped me. You comfort them by telling them your story. And then here's the fourth thing. It inspires other people. It brings affirmation. It brings victory. It brings comfort, and it brings inspiration. Philippians chapter 1, verse 14. One of my favorite stories. Paul's in trouble. He's in jail. He's been persecuted. Life is not good. But he says this in verse 14. Because of my chains, most of my brothers in the Lord have been encouraged to speak the word of God more courageously and fearlessly. Man, they're a little timid about sharing their story, and then they hear Paul's story, and Paul's in jail, and he's still praising God. He's still serving God, and they're inspired to do it. You inspire people with your story. And so I encourage you to tell your story. Now, here's a way to do that. Here's an exercise. And this is going to be a little bit longer than I meant for it to be, and this is going to be a terrible endeavor, but I'm going to try this anyway. Marilyn Murray, in her wonderful work on trauma healing, uses a tool that she developed called the trauma egg. Sometimes I call it the life egg because it doesn't have to have a lot of trauma in it. But this is a way to tell your story. Now, there's a lot more to the Murray method than this. And if you're interested in that, if you feel like you need some healing from trauma, here's a paid political announcement. Contact Branches. Go through one of our trauma workshops. Your life would be changed because of it. I tell you that. But here's one of the tools. It's called the trauma egg. I'm going to disappear and show you the trauma egg. I encourage you to get a big piece of paper, a poster board, and write your three things on it. First, draw a big egg. Art is not a prerequisite. Draw a big egg. And then in the upper corner, in the upper left-hand corner, write family roles. And just list your immediate family, what the roles were. I've done this 1,000 times, so this comes pretty quick. My dad was the absent dictator. He wasn't there. Even when he was there, he wasn't there, and we ruled with an iron fist. My mom was a peacemaker. Keep peace at all costs. I'm the oldest. I was the fix-it guy. Whatever went wrong, it's my job to fix it. My oldest sister, Charlotta, was the princess. Shonda, I know this doesn't surprise you, she was the family clown. Just on down through. Write the roles. Try in 1 or 2 words to define the roles of your nuclear family, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, that kind of thing. On the other corner, write family rules. And these are the rules that may or may not have been spoken, but you knew they were the rules. Here's 2 of ours. We had more, but 2. Number 1, we keep secrets. Never let people know what's going on in your life. And number 2, keep dad happy no matter what. So what were the 2 or 3 rules that you knew you operated under? Just write those. And then you go to the egg. It's egg proper. Draw a big egg. Start at the very bottom with the first thing you can remember. I was 4 years old. My father was getting a new car, and we went out to get ice cream in the car that he was going to trade the next day. And I remember laying in the back seat and crying and crying. I don't think that's terribly traumatic. It's just the only car that I ever knew. And it was just, it was like losing my best friend when I was 5. And then from there, you just start thinking, okay, what happened when I was 5? What happened when I was 6? And here's what I'm trying to think of. What are those events in my life that changed the way I thought about myself, that changed what I thought about God, that changed what I thought about the world around me? Those kinds of events, good or bad. There can be some positive ones. I'll show you. When I was 5 years old, I had a rabbit named Midnight, and Midnight died. First time I ever experienced loss or death, just remember that. When I was 6, I was in the first grade, and we had a spelling bee of first, second, and third graders, and I won. I was a first grader, and I beat the third graders. And I began to think, I'm really smart. Now, I found out later that wasn't true, but at that moment, it changed how I felt about myself. And then, when I was 7, we moved for the first time in the middle of the school year. So that's a U-Haul truck. And then on, my sisters died close together. I met Doris. I broke Doris's heart. Jesus put us all back together. You fill the egg. And it's important to draw pictures. Draw little pictures and fill the egg with those stories that changed how you thought about yourself, how you thought about God, and what you thought about the world around you. Take that story. First of all, give it to God. Pray through it, read through it, cry through it, all those things. And then take that story and sit down with some people or a person that really is important to you, that you really trust, and say, I would just like to tell my story, to say it out loud one time. I promise you, number one, God will use it for great affirmation. There'll be great victory in it. There'll be a wonderful time of comforting others, and you will inspire other people. By the way, I would encourage you to sit down with your children, with your grandchildren. And if you haven't done this, tell them your story. Well, that was a 1-hour lecture in 12 minutes and 3 seconds, and that's longer than it needed to be. But tell your story. There's great power in telling your story. I may say more about this later on. I certainly will post something every day on Facebook and Instagram about telling your story. Thanks for being a part of my story. God bless you through this week. I hope that your story is wonderful in every way. Have a great day.